Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. One of the things that a lot of our cultures have taught us is that we can think our way into being better people. This comes up very, very frequently. How can I be more compassionate when I'm feeling angry or when I'm not feeling compassionate or something like that? And of course, in many spiritual traditions, especially Buddhist traditions, there's this idea of cultivating compassion and following certain sort of self-examination rules and thought patterns. For instance, imagine that every other being is your mother or something like that. But these are all kinds of devices and ways of relating to something like compassion that we don't really have in our tradition, Trikashaivism or Dzogchen. And the idea is that compassion is not something we have. It's something that is permeating all of reality. It's part of the natural state or the base state of this alive, aware reality. It's hard to imagine what I'm talking about if your concept of reality is something more mechanistic or materialistic. You know, you think of reality as some planets and stars and galaxies and space and electrical energy, magnetic energy, and gravity. And, you know, that's kind of your idea of reality. And no matter how many times I say this alive, aware reality, if you don't have direct experience of that, it's a little hard to understand what I mean. But in this tradition, and in my life as a practitioner and others who practice in these kinds of traditions, these direct realization traditions, you discover for yourself through your own senses that this reality has consciousness. This reality is self-aware. All of reality is self-aware. So if we can think of all of reality kind of like a super person, and this is why we personify reality as something like Lord Shiva or Durga or Ganapati or something like that. In the Indian traditions, all of reality is personified. The same in Dzogchen, Samantabhadra. You know, these are personifications of all of reality, and so we can relate to all of reality through this figure of a deity. And it's not just some cute little thing that we're doing and that we don't really quite get, but we're doing it anyway because that's what our teachers tell us to do. The reason why they're personified is because this reality is like a person in that it has self-awareness and it has intelligence and it has the ability to reflect and contemplate and create. So how do we think of that? We think of that as us, but without any limitations. We are reflections. All life is a reflection of that self, that cosmic self, that is basically the ground of existence. And so that ground of existence, I call it lots of different things, but one of the things I call it is wisdom virtue, because it is made of immense, unfathomable wisdom, clarity, and all of these wisdom virtues that we're trying to realize in our lives, like compassion, like mercy, like tenderness, like devotion. It also has a lot of humor and creativity. These are all the living quality of what we call the natural state in Dzogchen. So when we say, like, how can I be more compassionate? What that means in this tradition is how can I relax so that the natural existence of compassion spontaneously manifests in me in this circumstance. So the idea is that there's not a mental, intellectual machination that we want to be going through. We want to be relaxing. Now, what does that mean? Yikes. One of my teachers, when he would talk about relax, I can't remember, maybe this was Lamkar Norbu, I don't remember, but I've imitated it, whoever it was, many times. You know, how if you're somewhere and somebody says relax and you go, you're trying to relax, and it's this very, very crude idea of relaxation. And even that, just relaxing your body, seems almost insurmountably difficult, right? And when we're talking about relaxation in this tradition, we mean not only relaxing your body, but relaxing your mind, relaxing your karmas, relaxing your sense of self, relaxing all your concepts about yourself and everybody else. Wow, it's very thorough. Now, you can't just order yourself to do that. You can't just, sit there and say, I'm going to relax all my concepts, and now compassion is going to naturally arise. It doesn't work that way. Boy, if it did, we'd be having a lot more fun. So what can we do in those circumstances? There's only one thing we can do if we're going to be in line with the view of this tradition and doing something actually practical. And that is be in the state of our practice. Now, what does that mean, and how can we do that? You cannot apply the advice of a tradition unless you're practicing in that tradition. So this advice is not for people who are not practicing. But when we practice every day, we have a feeling for the condition that practice leads us to discover. So we're practicing, and in the accumulation of days, and also the accumulation of being around our teacher and our communities, that kind of deeper relaxation starts to seep in, and we start to recognize it, first in a small way and then in a bigger way. And what do we want to be able to do? We want to be able to bring it back on at will. We want to be able to, in the midst of our tensions, like being angry, we want to be able to have such a deep taste of our daily practice or our feeling of being with our teacher that we can just instantly relax into that. Now, of course, depending on what stage of your practice you're at, where you are in your spiritual development, that is going to look different for everybody else. You're not going to relax into total enlightenment. Okay? You're going to relax into whatever you've discovered so far, whatever you're able to embody so far. It's very difficult, for instance, when you move to a new city and you need GPS to get anywhere because you don't know how to get anywhere. So you can only be in the state of your practice when you're actually practicing. That's sort of phase one. Phase two is you kind of sort of get how to get where you need to go, but you're still not sure of it. And it's difficult. And some days you can do it, and some days you still need your GPS. And then finally, you know how to get there without even thinking about it. It's like becomes second nature, or in this case, first nature. And then it becomes very, very easy to drop into the state of your practice when you notice that you're in a state of tension. The number one way that you do this is by practicing every day and receiving transmission. You can also do guru yoga. There are ways of dropping into the state of your practice that involve actually practicing in that moment. If we're enough immersed in our practice, we can just do it without any apparatus. If we aren't at that place yet, we can use our literal practice when we're out and about. Like we're angry at someone and then we start internally chanting a mantra that we've been doing in our seated practice, or we start doing some internal pranayama or kriya yoga, or we do guru yoga. That is the fastest way to get back into the state of your practice. And there's two ways of doing guru yoga. One of them is if you have a kind of teacher-student relationship that's transmission-based and that you feel very connected to. If you feel very connected to it, you can just think of your teacher and you will relax. You'll be in a different condition. That's the easiest form of guru yoga if you actually have that kind of relationship with a teacher. If you don't, or you're unsure, then you can do formal guru yoga practices, which I teach every single year, and which I'm going to teach again in 2025, so you can come get those. But those of you that have taken those teachings already, you know that there's a lot of different guru yoga practices, but the basic idea is that you suddenly drop into more of a condition that you're in when you're around your teacher or when you're recognizing essence nature, which is the ultimate guru. So practices like the White and things like that. And there's other ones that are more or less complicated or simple. So whatever you need to do in that moment to just drop into the state of your practice, you do that, and then you see what comes out of your mouth. The other thing is that when we're angry or when we're just running our karmas, it could be anger, it could be envy, it could be sadness, it could be annoyance and fear, it could be anything. We have karmic patterns in all the different flavors. The hardest part is often remembering to be in the state of our practice, because those karmas have momentum and we're attached to those ways of being. So the resistance really happens at the moment where we remember a little bit, but then we don't actually do anything to be in the state of our practice. We just let our karmas run. In that case, there's something, and this could be different for everybody, but it's like, how do you get over that hump of resistance? Well, you can try sheer willpower. That works like 5% of the time. What works for me is remembering what it is that I actually want. I think of my teacher, Nanda Mayamana, and I think, is this who I actually want to be? Is this what my life is actually about? And the answer is no. My life is not about running these karmas. That's not who I want to be. And that kind of spurs me to put into practice whatever I need to put into practice to get over whatever hump of resist. The resistance is usually because we're having some kind of pleasure in stomping around or crying or whatever we're doing. There's attachment to it, there's pleasure in some little bit of pleasure at least in those karmas. So it's like we have to walk away from that. How do we walk away from that? For me, it's just reminding myself, what is my life actually about? Who do I actually want to be? What am I actually doing here? I'm going to waste my life in these cheap thrills? And then it's easier for me to be back in the state of my practice. But that might not be what works for you. I'm just sharing what works for me. The idea is that in order to be compassionate, we have to actually be compassionate. That's it. There's no other instruction. We have to actually make contact with compassion. We have to relax enough so that that can express. There's no formula for acting compassionate. And I'll tell you that anybody that's discerning, which isn't everyone, but anyone that's discerning, the cringe factor of being around people that are acting compassionate is not nice. I can tell you, this is my very first experience from being in Hindu communities, walking into a room full of Buddhist practitioners acting compassionately. I just was like, what? What is going on here? And then, of course, the passive aggression and the meanness comes out somehow. It just doesn't work to pretend you're being compassionate. It's not what actually works for people or you. So don't waste your time. Spend your time being in the state of your practice.
What are the limits to compassion? My understanding is that while deepening your practice of compassion helps you be more compassionate, if there are actions that you can take that limit suffering in the world, we should take them.
Everything you just said is not part of the view of this tradition. First of all, there is no limit to compassion. There is absolutely no limit to compassion. And when you have an experience of natural compassion in the larger sense of what permeates all of reality, it has no boundaries, it has no limits, it's not denied to anybody. It is simply overflowing everywhere at all times. So there are no limits. Now, we are limited in our experience. So we are never going to be 100% expressive of that never-ending, all-encompassing compassion. What do? We are not trying to do good in the world. We are destroying the limitations that we have so that we naturally want to be of benefit. Though we are not forcing ourselves into following rules that somebody or other in some tradition says will be of benefit to others. We are doing practice to destroy the limitations that we have so that we actually naturally want the best for everyone, and that compassion just naturally manifests without any mentation or rules or precepts. Now, we do have some precepts, and I am going to be giving a teaching on those in the coming year, but those precepts are not moral or ethical precepts. They're precepts for functionally managing your energy so that you don't get entangled further in karmas that you then have to unwind. So you don't create more work for yourself, right? But fundamentally, these traditions, Dzogchen and Trika, are not based on ethics and morals, because those are unnecessary, because the view of these traditions in my own personal experience is that the foundation of reality is already beneficent. It already is full of all the virtue that we're trying to embody. And so we don't need ethics to embody it. We need to remove our perceptual limitations to embodying it, our sensory limitations, the limitations of body, energy, and mind. So these traditions circumvent systems of ethics and morals and go right to let's do practice so that we can naturally embody these things. I like to say, let's discover compassion for reals instead of just embodying it in some intellectual way because somebody said it was good to be compassionate. So there's a difference. It's a pretty profound difference, but it's a little hard to sort of veer in that direction if you're used to hearing it talked about in a different way. Some of my Buddhist teacher friends are horrified when I say that ethics are not needed. Horrified. But in our view, ethics is already built in. In other words, it's part of the natural state, so we don't need to invent anything or artificially follow anything. We can do the practice, and then the limitations that we're experiencing will eventually give way, and then we'll discover those wisdom virtues are naturally present in us all the time. In Dzogchen, they say perfect from the beginning. You're already perfect from the beginning. You don't need fixing. You just want to change your experience so it's less limited.
Does this allow for suffering to exist in the world still?
Okay, so just
Not
using
ethical.
myself as an example, maybe to make it a little more clear, I've been experiencing the suffering in the world since I was a little girl and trying to do something to relieve other people's suffering since I was a very little girl. And I'm very politically involved, more than a lot of other spiritual teachers are out there talking about things. And why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? I'm not doing that because it's right or wrong. I'm doing it really 100% because I feel moved to do it. I feel something. That's why I'm doing it. I feel moved by the condition of the others that I meet here. When I was a really little girl, like 5 years old, I used to make lemonade or iced tea in little paper cups on a tray and take it down to the train station near my house and serve the people that had come to the richer neighborhoods to work as housekeepers, maids. I would serve them iced tea and lemonade. Why did I do that? No one said, oh, this is a good thing to do to help other people. No, I just felt them. I felt them. This is just natural compassion. It doesn't have any reason. It doesn't have any ethics. And your question about suffering. So there are, relative teachings and absolute teachings. So the absolute teaching, both in most Buddhist traditions and in these traditions, is that there is no suffering. What that means is that there's a play of suffering. We're experiencing suffering here, and our experience is real. It's not fake or an illusion or a delusion or anything like that. But every part here is being played by the same self. So there really is no other, and there really are no worlds. There are the appearings of worlds and others. That is the creative life process of this alive, aware reality. The teaching is there's no suffering. There's a play of suffering. And we are, as practitioners and traditions like this, we're not discounting that and saying, oh, it's just an illusion, everything's one, let's go to our pink cloud and whatever. We're not doing that. We're saying, this is God's stage. This is God's playground. This is God's house. This is God's city, is the major metaphor in this tradition. This is God's city. And it's meant for participation. And it's meant for feeling all these feelings, including compassion. It's meant for that, to be like a stage for those things to be able to express fully. But the real absolute teaching is nothing is really happening. Nothing is really happening. And it's just like when we go to the movies. When we go to the movies, we love crying and laughing and feeling angry and feeling scared. You know, people who like horror movies, oh, it was so scary, it was great. But we know that it's a drama. So we're enjoying everything and the full play of emotions. I cried through the whole thing, it was so great. This is more how God is. This is more how God is, enjoying this play, enjoying this drama of everything. But on another level, there's no objective reality to this. This is all a subjective reality. It's real, but it's just not what we think it is before we have a certain kind of practice under our belt. So in this tradition, we're doing something that's actually pretty tricky, because people in transcendental traditions get to pretend they're going to get to walk away from this. They get to say, well, when it's all one, I won't be feeling anything and whatever. I'll then graduate to Brahmaloka or whatever. We don't have that kind of thing going on here. We don't have that promise. It's more that when we realize more, then we're just here experiencing all this in a different way, which from the perspective of Dzogchen and Trika is fun. It's more fun. So as my Dzogchen teacher famously used to say, we relax and we enjoy, meaning we realize and then we just enjoy what's here. So if you ask me why I have been trying to alleviate people's suffering from when I was a very little girl, or attend to it or recognize it in some way, it's because I enjoy doing that. It's because I moved to do it. I didn't have the language when I was 5 years old. I didn't have any language about why I was doing it. I just felt moved. But now that I've been doing this, I recognize that there's this trick going on where you do feel what the natural state really is, but nonetheless, you participate even more. You feel more compassion for others. It doesn't matter that you know that God's playing all these parts. It just doesn't matter, because this is what God is doing. This is what that Supreme Self is doing. And we get to participate in it in any way we want. You don't have to be doing what I'm doing. You could do it some totally different way. But I'm just saying there's not this apparatus of explanations about why it's good or righteous or ethical or whatever. It's simply being moved to do it. And my teacher called that KL. It's a word that means form of improvisational music in India. She said, I never do anything other than because of KL. And meaning that she was just moved to do something. She felt moved by the whole to do whatever it was she was doing. And if she didn't feel that, she just didn't do it. That was the complete explanation of why she did or didn't do anything. When people came to her for healing, sometimes she would do it. And she would say, I had KL to heal this person. Other times she wouldn't, and everyone would be very upset with her. And she said, I don't have KL to do that. She didn't say, well, it was ethically right in this case, but it wouldn't be ethically. She had no intellectual explanatory apparatus about it. So one way of describing the fruit of this practice is to live in a state of utter spontaneity.
Could I extrapolate just slightly?
Extrapolate on.
Were there more workers that you were bringing lemonade to than there was lemonade that you made?
Well, in the universe?
Huh?
In the universe?
No, in your example of who were...
I have no idea.
I guess my point is that if there was more than you had the energy to provide for, you would be so moved as to no longer provide lemonade to these individuals.
Why?
There's going to be some limit to your compassion at which you no longer can provide
So I wouldn't provide to any because I couldn't provide to all? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you provide up to the limit of your capacity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also had a physical capacity. I was 5 years old. And, and I just had the little tray that was in my mom's kitchen. I couldn't go out and buy myself a bigger tray. I had no such thoughts like that. I have no idea. I have no such thoughts about that now either, because we have limitations. It doesn't matter how realized we are. We all have limitations, right? That's just an aspect of human life. I'm completely okay with that. I don't have to be some superhero. I'm not doing it for me to be a hero, or I'm not trying to like say that I did compassion. You know? What my litmus test is, am I giving my all? Whatever that looks like. That's all I want. I just want to give what I have to give. And I realize it's not what this alive and aware reality could give, or someone who's much more realized than I am could give. I'm giving what I have to give, and that's enough. That's all I can do. It's realistic, and it's practical, and it's modest, and it's just the reality of things. We all have limited energy. And we do all participate in compassion in a limited way. That's just our condition. And we're not saviors. We don't want to get into a savior complex about this. Plus, we're not actually saving anybody. I'm not actually teaching anybody. You're not actually learning anything. I mean, this is all just for fun. And it's great to have that attitude as a practitioner and as a teacher. It's the best. Then instead of all of us sitting around thinking that we're doing something terribly important, and I'm terribly important because I'm a teacher, we can have the attitude, no, this is just this self experiencing itself as teacher and student, and ultimately it's playfulness. It's ultimately for play. And it really just takes the wind out of our sails in a very, very good way, I think. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jayakula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.